Is the government right to ban trans women from female toilets? New guidance is expected to be published today, is set to say that trans women should be excluded from female toilets, changing rooms and some single-sex spaces. It follows last year's Supreme Court ruling that the term woman and sex in the Equality Act refers to biological sex rather than gender. The updated guidance is expected to tell organisations, including the NHS, councils, gyms, hospitals and leisure centres, how they should apply the law. It could affect everything from public toilets, changing rooms to hospital wards, prisons and even sports teams.
Now, the government says the aim is to provide legal clarity around single-sex spaces. So campaigners who welcomed the Supreme Court ruling say organisations should now move quickly to update their policies. Others are arguing that any guidance must also protect the dignity, safety and the participation of trans people in public life. So where should the balance be struck? Should access to female-only spaces be determined by just biological sex? What does fairness look like in practice? And can rules designed to protect one group end up actually excluding another? Yasmin, where do you stand on this?
I think that last sentence, that you do something to protect one group and the effect on another can be really damaging. Because where would a trans person go to the loo then? Do you expect somebody who identifies as a woman and he dresses as a woman to go into a male toilet?
Well, I mean, that's what the law does, yes.
I mean, how would that be? How would that feel? And what if, and this is the question nobody's asked, you know, I completely understand the campaigners who've campaigned for single sex. I'm a woman, but I'm not in agreement with many of my feminist sisters in the way that the whole group of people has been demonized of late, that they're a kind of real threat to society. If this trans person goes into a male toilet, right, and is raped, because a man can also be raped, let's not forget that, right? What happens then? Well, how safe do they feel? And they would never go into a male toilet if they identify as a woman. And the same goes for wards. What are we going to do? Stick them into men's wards? This thing is so complicated. And I think we should kind of worry about the anger around it and just think of the human needs.
Mike?
Well, it is a very complicated subject. And we are dealing with a very small proportion of the overall population, right? And yet there seems to be an awful lot of noise about it and you know, things that have got to be done. I mean, personally, if I was in a male toilet and a transition person came in, I would not be offended because I know that person is biologically a male. It wouldn't offend me. I mean, you know, the idea that rapes could take place in male toilets, I mean, that is a really...
No, this is an argument that has been used for the other way around. They were saying, you know, these men coming into our toilets.
Yes,
and
well, I think that can happen. I think that's a big danger.
Happens.
Exactly, but if you make it easier by allowing biological men to go into women's toilets, then that is going to happen. But I
think that's quite unfair.
Why?
Men don't always go around raping women in every situation.
No, I know they don't, but men should not have access to women-only spaces, whether it's a toilet or changing rooms in a shop or a special area for biological women.
But crucially, these are trans women, and it works the other way as well. So it will mean that trans men are not allowed to use male toilets, so they will have to then use women's toilets. So it could be in a situation where you're going to the bathroom, Yasmin, and somebody like Mike, somebody that looks like Mike, walks into your toilet and is completely legally supposed to be using it.
So we have an example. So this is the son of Cher. His name is Shaz Bono. So this is a trans man. So we're saying that this person now has to, by the rules, by the English law now, has to use a female toilet. So you're a woman, you're in a toilet, this person now has to use your toilet.
Yeah, I think that's wrong. I think that's wrong.
But that's applying the law.
Well, look, most establishments, right, do have a disabled toilet. Can that not be incorporated as also for use by transitioning people?
I don't think...
Is there anything wrong with that?
Well, I'm not sure people with disabilities will be happy.
Well, hang on. I'm not saying that a transition person is disabled, but what I'm saying is it's a facility which I've noticed in many places I go to, which neutral and which is not overused. In fact, some establishments have one because they have to, but they don't have any customers who are disabled.
But there are two other options which many arts organisations and theatres are using. You have male, female, and
unisex.
And that seems to be a very good choice.
But it's very, very expensive to provide unisex toilets. There's one organisation I work at where they spent 3 months changing the toilets that they used to have, which were unisex but not separate, into separate cubicles, 8 separate cubicles in all, 4 for men, 4 for women. It costs an absolute fortune, right? And if every establishment's got to do that, it's not viable, I'm afraid.
Well, I just don't think it's fair otherwise. And the other very important thing is men are always cleaning. women's toilets. I don't feel threatened.
Yes.
I don't feel threatened by them.
I thought you stopped at men are always cleaning, and I was about to say, statistically not enough, Yasmin, actually.
Yeah, but Yasmin, they're there as cleaners. They're there for a
Yeah, but
specific
the idea
purpose.
that men being there-
But women get frightened if they see somebody enter that area who is clearly biologically a male, and I don't blame them for being frightened. I don't think it should be allowed.
Okay, I'm delighted to say that we are joined by friend of the show and diversity and inclusions campaigner, Katie John Went. Katie, thank you very much for joining us. How do you feel about this announcement that is likely to be made today that somebody like yourself wouldn't be able to use a female toilet?
Well, I'm not surprised by the announcement. I do think it's inevitable, but I also think it's sad. It does feel like socially we've gone back 5 or 10 years. And some of that is, I think, due to trying to go forwards too fast, perhaps, and not keep everyone up with how do we feel about this. But I have literally just got off an aeroplane from Denmark, and it's a completely different social vibe there of comfort around this and rules around this. And I wonder what's going to happen when people get off their airplanes from Europe and come to the UK and see a toilet door sign and assume it's the same as Europe. And instead, they actually don't see a Supreme Court ruling pinned to the door, and as a result are concerned about which toilet they are meant to use.
What would be a sensible course of action in this situation? What would you like to see happen? What do you think could happen?
I think it's already happening. Mike described it saying it's kind of, it's kind of not, it's just not viable financially and it's causing business chaos, but businesses have already been doing it for the last year. I've seen it and witnessed it. Yes, it is costing money, but actually they want their customers to be comfortable. They want their staff to be comfortable. And there's been a number of 2 or 3 different cases in the last year where toilet rules in the workplace have gone either way in different tribunals, because people were uncertain of how to apply it to their staff and how to apply it to customers. And there was even a point where customers and staff would have 2 different rules for toilet use. We're kind of the compromise should be comfortable and easy for all, not overcomplicated for all. It shouldn't be that you walk up to a toilet and go, now what is the rule here? Am I a client? Am I a customer? Is this a public building? Is this a privately owned building? What kind of space is this? It should be really simple. And I think the way forward is proper labelling. And everywhere I'm going now, I am seeing unisex toilets popping up all over the place, rebranding of toilets. Some toilets I've just seen being labelled a toilet, and that's it. But also more. That's kind of bizarrely simple. It's the same as the one in your house. It's the same as the one in smaller restaurants where they often only have one toilet. I have to pick up a point with Mike though as well. As someone who is disabled and has waited more than 15 minutes to get into a disabled toilet cubicle before, they are not underused. And where businesses or places or whatever find that they're not being used because they don't have disabled customers, they don't have disabled customers because they don't have accessible buildings and accessible facilities, and they're often not available like that. I do think as someone who's disabled people should use them. We shouldn't automatically just relabel the toilets disabled and trans now. That's a whole new form of pathologizing. I do think there is space in buildings to do some rebuilding and some relabeling, and it would solve it. Yes, it's going to cost money, but it's going to save a lot of money in tribunals as well. And I think that's the funny thing though is that I have lots of literally all my female friends. They keep going to the women's, Katie. I don't anymore. I was hounded out of a women's toilet by one woman 18 months ago, before the Supreme Court ruling actually. But every other woman in that toilet stood up for me. And and I understand how it made that one woman feel, but I also understand that 99% of the other women didn't have the same concern. As a result, I don't want to go into a women's toilet now in a place where I'm not welcome or where you might be chased out or where someone might call the police. But when I travel, I recognise that changes. If I'm out with a group of girls, as I was in Denmark last week, I go to the women's with them, and they would find it surprising if we then got to the toilet doors and split off into 2 different groups. And I've been threatened with male toilets, so it does happen. Yeah,
I'm terribly sorry that you can't just go to the toilet, Katie. It feels like a very simple thing that everyone should just be able to do without a huge amount of thought. Let's go to the calls. Elizabeth from Leeds, what's your view on this? Are you happy with the announcement that's supposed to be made today?
Good morning, Storm. Kalimera, Alexis.
Kalimera.
And I'd love to agree with Yasmin and your guest, Katie. This is a nonsense ruling. It's unworkable, and it makes no sense.
Why do you say it's unworkable?
I'm a woman because all it will lead to is small instances in public, as Katie said, of an odd woman opposing somebody that they think is a trans woman. There are many women who don't look as feminine as society tells us that we should, particularly older women with short grey hair. It's absolute nonsense. It's discriminatory, and the majority of women are inclusive of their trans sisters. It also, if you think it through, just allow me to make my point. If you think it through, it means that trans men who look like men are forced into the women's, and that will force women to oppose them. It's ridiculous, and we will continue campaigning. Katie spoke, obviously, with all of this knowledge, and so did Yasmin. This is something I know a lot about, and in fact, the majority of women who count ourselves as feminists are against this Supreme Court ruling, which was brought by a handful of wealthy people. It's not in law, and if the government has announced this today, this is also not the law. There are many places where there's only one toilet, particularly a train or a plane. They're not genderised. Small cafes often have only one toilet.
Somebody's
Many
house.
places are just calling it the toilet.
Well, I think Elizabeth, look, you make a very strong point, but I think the concerns are not when there's a single toilet, is when there are multiple cubicles in one enclosed space. I think those, for the people who are concerned about this, that's what they're pointing out. They're not pointing out a single toilet that can be used by multiple people. But we should say that data that's being collected, and I think that comes back to your point as well, Mike, from local authorities representing 16.5 million people, 36 councils, 0 incidents, 0 complaints. There are 2 single complaints over a year. 1 was actually over the rules. So there aren't those complaints that are so widespread that the government needs to kick in and do something about.
What are the complaints about?
One of the 2 complaints was actually about procedure rather than actually complaining about an individual.
Exactly. So are you saying the problem isn't big enough to have to unilaterally change the way we operate in society?
Well, look,